Shalom. First and foremost, Kal Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harakak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, the great millstone that I learned this truth from. And also peace and salutation to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And the title of this video is going to be, The Lord Shall Punish the Host of the High Ones. Alright, and that's quoting from the book of Isaiah, chapter 24, as you see I have here on the screen. This is coming from Isaiah 24 and verse 21. Okay, because pretty much, with this particular verse, okay, what it pretty much talks about is is pretty much what's going to happen after nuclear destruction, the nuclear destruction of America, Babylon the Great. Okay, after World War III, after the missiles drop. All right, because as you start from verse 19 at the top of the screen, Isaiah 24 verse 19, the earth is utterly broken down, the earth is clean dissolved, the earth is moved exceedingly, the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. All right, and is that saying that when the missiles hit and the nuclear destruction comes to pass, is that talking about the whole entire earth is going to be destroyed and not rise again, or not flourish again? No. Okay, it's ultimately talking about America, Babylon the Great, when the missiles hit America. All right, as well as certain other parts of the earth as well. Different parts of Europe is going to be hit by missiles in World War III. Parts of Russia is going to be hit by missiles. Parts of China is going to be hit by missiles. North Korea, parts, Iran, Australia, okay, and many other parts of the world are going to be hit by nuclear missiles in World War III. But ultimately, the whole entire earth is not going to be destroyed. All right, by the time the Lord come back, okay, because as Scripture speaks about, the earth abideth forever. Okay, Scripture says the earth abides forever. All right, but ultimately, Isaiah 24 verses 19 and 20 is talking about, when the missiles are going to be shot off in World War III. Okay, nuclear missiles, ICBM nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles. All right, and ultimately going to be used by Yahweh Shema Shai to destroy, all right, to utterly destroy Babylon the Great, America. Okay, America is going to be destroyed so utterly that it's going to make the earth shake, to and fro like a drunkard, as it said. Okay, that's how devastating the Lord is going to bring judgment upon this place, America, Babylon the Great. Okay, it's going to destroy this place, just as the Lord destroyed ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, by raining down fire and brimstone from the heavens. But this time, the fire and brimstone in this modern time is going to come in a form of ICBM nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles. All right, and so when you get down to verse 21 in this chapter, pretty much after the the smoke clears, so to speak, right? And the elect, along with the Yahushua, come down from the heavens as the new Jerusalem, with the new bodies, okay, indestructible, incorruptible, all right, with, being brought under the new covenant, okay. Lord will not be of the number of the elect, okay. When you get down to verse 21, it says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord Yahweh Shema Shah shall punish the hosts of the high ones that are on the earth, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. So after the smoke clears, so to speak, and the elect, like unto New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation, come down from the heavens with the new bodies, okay, led by Yahweh Shai. When we come down from the heavens off of the chariot in the new bodies, all right, to gather the heathen nations up into captivity under us. The first of the heathen nations that we're going to gather is their high ones, okay, their kings, their nobles, okay. starting with the top elite banking families of Esau, Edom. Okay, the elite banking families of Esau, Edom, and the elite families amongst the rest of the heathen nations. They're nobles, they're technocrats. Okay, these different leaders of these different heathen nations and their countries. Their presidents, their prime ministers, right? Their leaders, their mighty ones, their top ranking military men that are going to be left alive in his day. Okay, they're going to be amongst the first of those that are going to be gathered up into captivity under us. Okay, in the kingdom of heaven. It says, Isaiah 24 verse 21 again, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord Yahweh Shemashah shall punish the hosts of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. Okay, not in some place underneath the ground called hell. Okay, no, these wicked rulers of the earth, these wicked kings and nobles and high ones of the earth, of the heathen nations, they're going to be punished and judged by Yahweh Shemashah here on the earth. Okay, not underground in some place called hell burning forever. Alright, no. It says, verse 22, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners, okay, into captivity. And they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. Alright, the pit being captivity, basically, under us Israelites in the kingdom of heaven. It says, and shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days shall be visited. All right, and ultimately what? After that first 1,000 years in the kingdom, okay, all of the seed of Esau, Edom, are going to be visited. All right, and that's when we're going to fulfill Obadiah 1 and 18. Okay, pretty much round up all Edomites throughout the four corners of the earth after the first 1,000 years in the kingdom, and just utterly burn them all alive. Okay, exterminate them off of the planet Earth. All right, that's Bible prophecy. Obadiah 1 and 18. Okay, there should be none remaining of the house of Esau forever. All right. It says, verse 23, then the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed. Okay, and the sun and the moon right here in this particular verse just represents the wisdom and the understanding and the knowledge of the heathen nations. Okay, because the sun and the moon symbolically and spiritually can represent knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so all the left hand knowledge and wisdom and the pseudoscience and the technology and the AI of Esau and these heathen nations is all going to be confounded. Okay, it's all going to come to naught. Their NWO agenda, their AI, their pseudoscience, their left-hand miracles, right? The MOTB, okay? This whole entire, digital Tower of Babel system that Esau and these heathen are trying to set up in the earthlings out of days, okay? When it's all said and done, the Lord's going to confound it. Just like the Lord confounded the ancient Tower of Babel, right? Confounded the languages of the heathen nations. Okay, the Tower of Babel came to naught back in ancient times. All right, where you had Nimrod, a Cushite, okay, Hamite of the lineage of Cush, okay, which the name Nimrod means rebellion. All right, when you read about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, going back to Genesis, the 10th chapter, as well as the 11th chapter, pretty much Nimrod tried to set up the NWO agenda of that time via the building of the Tower of Babel. But then eventually what? The Lord confounded that. Okay, well, guess what? As we see Esau, Edom coming in the spirit of Nimrod again, okay, rebellion, witchcraft, sorcery, idol worship, all right, trying to set up an NWO system of this time, all right, a modern day technological digital Tower of Babel, all right, the Lord is getting ready to confound this thing all over again and ultimately utterly destroy it. Okay, that which is then is now. It says, Isaiah 24 verse 23 again, then the moon shall be confounded and the sun ashamed. Okay, the wisdom and the knowledge of the heathen nations, right? It says, when the Lord Yahweh Shemashah of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before its ancients gloriously. All right, and that's going to take place in the kingdom of heaven. All right. So, as we read, all right, the kings and the nobles and the high ones amongst these heathen nations, as it says in verse 22 again, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. Okay, the kings, the nobles, the high ones of these heathen nations, all right, they're going to be amongst the first to go into captivity under us Israelites in the kingdom of heaven. All right, and now what I did was I typed in on ChatGPT. All right, what was this the strategic element of carrying kings and nobles into captivity when conquering a nation? All right, that's the question that I asked ChatGPT. All right, so this is the response that it gave me. It says, carrying kings and nobles into captivity after conquering a nation served clear strategic, political, and psychological purposes across many ancient and medieval societies. The practice wasn't just symbolic, it was a deliberate tool of control. It says key elements included number one, eliminating the rival leadership. Okay, it says removing the ruling elites prevented, all right, immediate counter organization or rebellion, the possibility of a rival claimant rallying resistance. Okay, so pretty much the one of the strategic elements of carrying kings and nobles of a nation into captivity when you conquer that nation is, as it went into, it eliminates rival leadership, and by conquering their kings and their nobles, it also prevents a counter, pretty much a counter rebellion or a counter uprising. You see that? It basically neutralizes that nation that you took down, just by simply bringing their kings and their leadership into captivity. Because by doing that, they pretty much have no strong leader, no type of leadership whatsoever for the common people of that nation to rally behind, to form some type of counterattack against you or some type of rebellion against you. So basically what? It neutralizes them, it pacifies them, right? Then I'm going to go down to says, a nation without its king or aristocracy, all right, which aristocracy means nobles, basically, when you look it up. It says a nation without its kings or aristocracy was far easier to govern or absorb. Okay, govern means what? Control. Okay, because a people without any form of king or leadership or nobles are easier to control, as they have no form of no central form of government to lean to solve problems. Okay, solve issues within their society or whatnot. All right, and so when we as Israelites, okay, especially us, the hopeful elect, all right, under Yahushua via the throne of David, when we carry the kings and the nobles of the heathen nations into captivity, is going to therefore make the rest of the heathen nations easier to bring into captivity. Because mind you, all right, kings, nobles, government, all right, those things all represents what? Heads of nations. Now, when you take, for example, somebody's actual head, right? When you carry somebody's actual head in one direction or multiple directions, right? What does that do to the rest of their body? Their torso, their arms, their legs, their feet. Okay, when you carry somebody's head in a particular direction or multiple directions, what does that do to the rest of their body? The rest of their body moves with whatever direction you're carrying their head to. So that's likened to when we carry the heads of these heathen, their kings, their nobles, their aristocrats, right? The princes. Then what? The rest of that nation is going to follow suit. Okay, the rest of that nation is going to be carried away as well into under your authority. right? With little to no resistance, okay? And so it goes into bullet point number 2, demonstrating total dominance. It says parading or imprisoning captured rulers was a powerful propaganda tool. It showed both the conqueror's own people and other nations that the victory was absolute. Okay. It says it served as a warning to others considering resistance. See that? So when you carried kings of another nation into captivity, it also serves as a psychological effect on that particular nation that you're conquering, as well as those other nations or countries that are allied with them. Like, look, you saw what I did to this particular king, or you saw what I did to this particular nobles or rulerships. So guess what? If y'all resist my authority, if you try to go against my authority, the same thing is going to happen to you. You see that? And that's what we're going to do to the rest of these heathen nations, okay? Especially when we carry the elite banking families of Esau, Edom into captivity under us. We're going to be like, look, if we did this to Esau, Edom, okay, the wicked himself, all right, then, what you think we're going to do to the rest of you heathen nations? That's the type of message that you send to different nations throughout the earth whenever you conquer, a particular nation, especially a nation such as Esau, Edom, right? Who's blessed with a sword, right? The wicked of the planet Earth. You see that? It says, I'm gonna jump down to bullet point number 3. It says legitimizing the conqueror's rule, capturing, not just killing the defeated ruler, allowed the victor to claim lawful succession or transfer of authority, present themselves as the new rightful sovereign, use the captive king to negotiate recognition or surrender of remaining territories. They would have to give up their land, all right, particular regions that they had control over, to the victor, right? Says sometimes captives were even kept alive as symbolic vassals, all right? And mind you, okay, even in the scriptures, the heathen even did that to certain of our kings, okay? Especially, during the time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, as Nebuchadnezzar, when he took down the pretty much the last few kings of Judah, all right, Zedekiah and those that ruled before them, okay, the kings of Judah that ruled before him. Not only would Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians take down our kings of Judah, but he would also make them vassals. Meaning what? They would have to pay tribute to Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, right? Give up, allow them to have access to the Holy Land for particular, reasons dealing with business and trade and whatnot, resources, okay, and then as well, they ultimately brought, certain of our kings, literally into captivity in Babylon, such as, Zedekiah, okay, the last king to rule over Judah before the Babylonian captivity, which when you read about, when Nebuchadnezzar brought Zedekiah into captivity, you read about how, Nebuchadnezzar pretty much slew Zedekiah's sons before him and plucked out his eyes, right? So on and so forth. Okay, they literally carried our kings into captivity throughout our various captivities, and that's ultimately spoken of right here in Deuteronomy 28 and verse 36. This is one of the curses that befell our people, due to breaking that first covenant and breaking the laws, right? Deuteronomy 28 verse 36. And the Lord Yahweh shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. And that happened throughout pretty much all of our captivities. Okay, especially the Babylonian captivity. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar brought Zedekiah and the kings of Judah before him into captivity in Babylon. All right, carried them headlong, slew their sons, right? And within the Babylonian captivity, many of our forefathers amongst primarily Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, fell to the idols of Babylon. Okay, and pretty much the same thing occurred throughout various captivities. Okay, the Persian Medes, the Greeks, the Romans. All right, and even to this very day here in America, Babylon the Great. Okay, the various so-called leaders amongst our people, the nobles amongst our people. All right, they're all pretty much set up by Esau Edom to do the bidding of Esau Edom. All right, and to deceive our people, keep our people docile, right? Keep our people under the vibration of idols, the idols of Esau Edom and the heathen, so-called white Jesus, and so on and so forth. All right, and so when we gather the kings and the nobles of these heathen under us, okay, we're gonna have complete control and dominance over them, right? And they're gonna be forced to worship our power, Yahweh Shema Shai, right? Hey, and matter of fact, because even as it speaks of in Deuteronomy 30, the Lord is going to reverse the curses upon our enemies. Starting with the tabernacles of Esau Edom. All right, so just as they brought our kings into captivity, along with the rest of our nation, well, guess what? When Yahweh comes back and give us that power, we're gonna carry their kings into captivity under us, along with the rest of their people, and make them worship our power, Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, and keep our laws and our commandments, right? And so, under number 3 again, it says legitimizing the conqueror's rule. It says capturing, not just killing, the defeated ruler allowed the victor to claim lawful succession or transfer of authority, present themselves as the new rightful sovereign, use the captive king to negotiate recognition or surrender of remaining territories. All right, then it says sometimes captives were even kept alive as symbolic vassals. All right, and so this is number 4. It says preventing martyrdom or backlash. Killing a king outright could turn him into a martyr, a rallying symbol for revolt. Yeah, so sometimes when you conquer a nation and you capture their kings and their nobles, if you kill their king or their leader, right away, then that can make them look like a martyr, like some type of hero for that nation. Okay, and it can ultimately do you a disservice by doing that. And so in this case, when we gather the kings and the nobles of the heathen, we're not gonna slay them outright right away. Okay, we're gonna capture them alive, right? So that what? So that they don't seem like martyrs or heroes or nobles for their nation. Okay, because we're gonna we're gonna show the whole world how wicked and decrepit and vile, all right, the rulers and the kings and the nobles of these heathen are throughout the earth. Okay, and how much they're responsible for the earth being in such a destroyed condition, right? It says captivity avoided this while still neutralizing the threat. All right. Then it says number 5, securing valuable hostages. Royal captives were extremely useful as bargaining chips in diplomacy, guarantees of loyalty from remaining nobles or client states, sources of ransom, tribute, or political concessions. All right. Sources of ransom, tribute, or political concessions. Yeah, because when you carry, okay, when you conquer the kings and leaders of a heathen nation, all right, or another nation, that would also be, serve as a major business move for the prosperity of your kingdom as well. They would, you'll be able to do particular trades with them. They will be subject to offering tribute to you or taxes, right? And let's get Isaiah 60. Let's get Isaiah chapter 60. All right, a glorified Zion, which when you read in Isaiah chapter 60 as well as chapter 61, pretty much both of these chapters goes into the future glory of ultimately the nation of Israel, starting with us, the hopeful elect. Okay, it basically goes into the glory that we're going to receive in the kingdom of heaven. All right, so here in Isaiah 60, and let's read verse 10, it says, "And the sons of strangers shall build up thy walls." Okay, the sons of the strangers, talking about the heathen nations in this case. All right, they're going to build up our walls, meaning what? They're going to serve slavery under us in the kingdom of heaven. They're going to be building up our palaces, our different buildings, right? Our mansions, right? It's our cities, okay? It says, Isaiah 60 verse 10 again, "And the sons of the strangers shall build up thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee. For in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee." So the kings of the heathen nations are going to minister unto us, which minister basically means what? Serve, okay? And the kings of the heathen nations are going to serve us in the kingdom, meaning what? They're going to be our slaves, okay? They're going to be at the forefront of our slaves, okay? Our top slaves, all right? It says, verse 11, "Therefore thy gates shall be open continually, they shall not be shut day nor night, that men may bring unto thee the forces of the Gentiles, and that their kings may be brought." You see that? So the forces of the Gentiles, right, the heathen nations in this particular prophecy, are going to be brought before us, as well as their kings. Okay, the forces of the Gentiles, their nobles, their high-ranking military men that's going to be left alive after World War III. Their top generals, top officers, top military advisors, whatever it may be, okay? They're technocrats, right? All the cream of the crop of the heathen nations are going to be brought before us and serve us, okay? Serve slavery under us in the kingdom, okay? They're going to be at the forefront of our slaves, right? And then it says, verse 12, "For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee," all right, the nation, whatever heathen nations tries to buck up against us, okay, and uproot themselves from under our authority, all right, shall perish. Yea, those kingdoms, Salakia, those nations shall be utterly wasted. See that? So when we get that power in the kingdom over these heathen nations, all right, we rule them. We rule over them with the rod of iron, right? Rebuke them, destroy their weapons, okay? Enforce the laws and the commandments upon them, okay? If they try to buck up against us and rebel against us, all right, and try to uproot themselves from under our authority, okay, they're going to perish. Meaning what? We're going to come down upon them, all right, and they're going to be wasted. You see that? A rod of iron is going to go over their head. We're gonna beat them down, right? And even the scriptures in the book of Zechariah speaks about how, roughly paraphrasing it, if the family of Egypt, refuses to keep I believe it goes into the Feast of Tabernacles, if I'm not mistaken. It talks about how we're gonna have the power to stop rain from coming down upon their land, which that's gonna result in what? Crop shortages, right? Which ultimately results in what? Famine. Okay, so we're in the kingdom we're even gonna have the power to send a famine upon any heathen nation that refuses to serve us, okay, and bow to us in the kingdom. You see that? And I'm gonna jump down to verse 15, Isaiah 60 verse 15. It says, "Whereas thou hast been forsaken and hated, so that no man went through thee, I will make thee an eternal excellency, a joy of many generations. You see that? And this particular verse right here, alone by itself proves that, all right, what you read of right here in Isaiah 60 is talking about a future prophecy. Okay? None of Isaiah the 60th chapter came to pass already in ancient times. This is talking about future prophecy. Okay? Specifically in the kingdom of heaven. All right? Because as I said again, Isaiah 60 verse 15, whereas thou hast been forsaken and hated, all right, us Israelites, being under these curses in captivity, right, so that no man went through thee, I will make thee an eternal excellency, a joy of many nations. Okay, the Lord didn't make us an eternal excellency back in ancient times, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be in captivity right now. We would be in rulership. Okay, we would be in the Holy Land, ruling over the heathen nations right now, as as of right now. But clearly, that's not the case. Okay, we're scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. All right, subject to fines and payments, having to work and get a job, right? Having to see Esau and these heathen nations ruling over us, and pretty much destroying the earth and destroying the Lord's creation, and trying to recreate creation in their own left-hand image via AI, pseudoscience, okay, the NWO agenda, the MOTB, right? So the fact that it said that the Lord is going to make us an eternal excellency here in Isaiah 60 verse 15 proves that this is talking about a future prophecy. Okay, the kingdom of heaven. All right, under Yahweh Shai. All right, it says, verse 16, thou shalt also suck the breast of the Gentiles, okay, the heathen nations, and shall suck the Slakin. And read it again. Isaiah 60 verse 16. Thou shalt also suck the milk of the Gentiles, the heathen nations, and shall suck the breast of kings. And thou shalt know that I, the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem El Shai, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. You see that? The mighty one of Jacob, and Jacob only. Okay, no heathen will receive salvation. No heathen will rule with us. Okay, with the throne of David being established. All right, no heathen will be brought into the new covenant or receive the new bodies. Okay, that's only reserved for Israelites. See that? And that's what this chapter is going into. But as I said again, Isaiah 60 verse 16, thou shalt also suck the milk of the Gentiles, the heathen nations, and shalt suck the breast of kings. Okay, and basically the milk of the Gentiles and the breast of kings is basically represents the riches and the wealth, okay, of the heathen nations. All right, because when we go into this word milk, this word milk is Strong's H2461, chalab, and it says milk, sour milk, cheese, and then it also says right here under definition B, abundance of the land, metaphorically. You see that? Abundance of the land. All right, and even down here in the Strong's definition, it says milk as the richness of kine. See that? So when it says we're going to suck the milk of the Gentiles, the heathen nations, all right, and suck the breast of the kings, is basically talking about we're going to heap, all right, and suck up the riches and the wealth and the abundance of the heathen nations. All right, we're going to have control over their lands, their resources, right? Because mind you, when you go to Genesis 27, not only was Esau blessed to receive the fatness of the earth by way of the sword, which we're at the end of Esau's blessing right now, going into 2026, right? But also in that same chapter, Genesis 27, Jacob was also blessed to receive the fatness of the earth, okay? The riches of the earth, the wealth, right? Controlling resources of the earth. And that's going to come to pass in the kingdom of heaven, right? Second Ezra 6 verse 9. Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. You see that? So the Israelites, we, the nation of Israel, starting with us, the hopeful elect, okay, we're going to suck up the milk, okay, the abundance, the riches, the wealth, and the lands of the heathen nations, all right, the fatness of the earth in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, when the Lord makes us an eternal excellency, as it speaks of in verse 15 in this chapter, Isaiah 60. Okay, but it's all going to start with us, okay, bringing the kings and the nobles of the heathen nations into captivity first and foremost. All right. So going back to ChatGPT, it says under number 6, disrupting the conquered society's hierarchy, removing nobles disrupted land administration, tax collection, military organization, social structure. All right, it says this destabilization made long-term occupation easier. All right, you know, said that's pretty much as it went into. That's pretty much all the or rather a few elements of how strategic it is to bring kings and nobles of another nation into captivity when you conquer their nations. Okay, it eliminates rebellion or revolt. It makes them a strategic ally. When it comes to business and trade and tribute and things like that. Okay, it also sends a message to all the other nations around the earth as well. Of what will happen to their kings and their nobles if they rebel against you. All right, and ultimately, these are all the things that we're gonna do to the heathen nations and their kings and nobles. All right, when Yahushua returns. Okay, when we get that power, the new bodies, right, and all the spiritual powers is gonna come with it, with the new bodies, right. And let's get Psalms 149. Psalms 149, and I'm going to start from verse 4. It says, for the Lord Yahweh Shema taketh pleasure in his people, okay, the Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, starting with us, the hopeful elect, the remnant. It says, he will beautify the meek with salvation. Okay, so what we're about to read from verse 4 on down in this chapter is all associated with salvation. Okay, with the return of Yahushua, whom this world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. It says, verse 5, let the saints be joyful in glory. Okay, who are the saints? When you go to the previous chapter, all right, Psalms 148, verse 14, it clearly tells you that the saints are the Israelites. Okay, and the Israelites only. All right, but it says again, Psalms 149, verse 5, let the saints be joyful in glory. Okay, and what is our glory? The kingdom of heaven. It says, let them sing aloud upon their beds. And what does a bed represent? A place of rest. Okay, and what is the the rest that we as Israelites are going to receive in the near future? The kingdom of heaven. All right. It says, verse 6, let the high praises of the Most High Yahweh be in their mouth, and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people. All right, ruling over the heathen with the rod of iron. Okay, rebuking them, destroying their weapons. Okay, making them subject to the laws and the commandments. Right. It says, verse 8, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all the saints. Praise ye the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai. You see that? And this is all again associated with salvation from verse 4 all the way down. Okay, us executing vengeance upon the heathen nations and punishments upon the heathen. All right, when we get into the kingdom, and as it said in verse 8, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron. Chains and fetters of iron represents what? Captivity, imprisonment, okay, slavery ultimately. See that? So the kings and the nobles and the aristocrats and the elites, right, and the technocrats of Esau, Edom, and these heathen nations, okay, starting with the top banking families of Esau, Edom, all right, the true kings currently on the earth right now, hey, they're going to be our first fruit slaves in the kingdom of heaven. See that? They're going to be the first fruits amongst the heathen to be brought into captivity under us in the kingdom of heaven. All right? And as it said in verse 9, to execute upon them the judgment written. So this is already written and prescribed by Yahweh Shema Shah before the foundation of the heaven and the earth. And as it speaks of in as Yahweh Shah said in the Gospels, the scripture cannot be broken. You see? So it's hardcore slavery and captivity is coming to these heathen nations. All right, starting with the tabernacles of Esau, Edom. It is all going to start with their kings, their nobles, their technocrats. They're mighty, military men. Okay, they're cream of the crop. All right, because again, as I made the point earlier, we pretty much the government body and the nobles and the kings of a nation represents the head of a nation, right? And so when we gather up the nobles and the kings of these heathen nations into captivity, then the rest of their body is going to follow. Meaning what? The rest of their people is going to follow suit. Okay, with little to no resistance, right? Vulnerable, okay? Easy to control, easy to conquer, right? And again, that's all. Let's go to Genesis 27. That's all going to fulfill the blessing that was given to our forefather Jacob. All right. Genesis 27 and verse 28. Therefore Yahweh will give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, right? The riches and the wealth of the earth, right? The milk of the Gentiles and the breast of kings, as we read in Isaiah 60, right? And it says, and plenty of corn and wine. Verse 29. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Okay, they're going to serve us in the kingdom. Hardcore captivity, slavery, right? It says, be Lord over thy brethren and let thy mother's son bow down to thee. So at the forefront of the heathen nations serving slavery under us is going to be the tabernacles of Esau, Edom. Starting with the top banking families of Esau, Edom. Their kings and their nobles, right? It says, cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. All right. So, Lord willing, this video is edifying. And until next time, shalom.